What's going on from Playa del Carmen, Mexico? We are here with another episode of the Circle Up podcast, and I'm excited to share with you one of the most enthusiastic, high energy, and visionary guests that we've ever had on the show. I think if there's one thing that's clear to me about the progress we're making together is that the quality of our guests, the ambition of the conversations that we're having on this show continue to grow. And so thanks for joining us on this journey. This episode covers a lot of ground around men's mental health, around youth mental health, around mental health in the Middle East, because in this episode we interview Ali Salama, who is someone I've taken the opportunity to get to know better in 2020. He's someone that's been, a friend to me, someone that's been a mentor to me, someone that's really been impactful for the way that I look at the world, specifically around painting a vision, dreaming big, and then going for it. And you really inspire me, Ali. So thanks for being on the show. For those of you who don't know who Ali is, he's going to talk about himself a little bit at the beginning, but I'll just share that Ali is the founder of Empower Mag, which is the first mental health magazine in the Middle East, and in 2019 won Harvard's top 7 most impactful social initiatives. Right now, Ali's been working on Empower and a multitude of other projects that impact mental health. I think the one thing that I've seen explode in my experience of knowing Ali is his social media following. When I first started following him, I think he was at 8,000 followers, and then less than a year later, he's at 40,000 plus followers, and it just is a testament. The number in of itself doesn't mean anything, but it's a testament to the fact that he has a reach, and because his message is so empowering, hence the name Empower, I'm really proud to be able to continue to share his voice. And I'm really proud that, Ali, you're working so hard to make a big impact in the world, to grow your followership so that more ears and more eyes can be on what you do, because what you do is making a huge difference. Please enjoy this episode with my friend and brother, Ali Salama.
Have run out of business, and some people depend on some people live on month to month, right?
Yeah,
Curb
no doubt.
isn't gonna I get it. Curb did an amazing job, and like whatever, people got $12,000 by the government. But like some people have car debt, some people have like mortgage, some people have, you know what I mean? That isn't just gonna cut it off for like the 6 months. So I think that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with the human psychology around fear and scarcity that is gonna freak out more than just the virus's effect. So that's just my thought here, and I think that especially with the winter coming, and especially with the lack of social interactions, we need to like fucking step up here. And I think that to be honest, I'm optimistic, but I also think that this is going to be a price that will cost us more than just 12 months of recovery. I think when you have to think about what people have adapted, people have become germaphobes now. People have developed different behaviors that typically we don't have, and to reverse this takes time, man. This takes absolute time, and yeah, I just yeah. That's just my 5 cents.
Well,
Anyway,
Well, Alan Watts, in a lot of his philosophy, talks about what you see in the outside world is just a reflection of what's happening inside of your head. And so over the course of the last 6, 7 months when COVID started, like, it's dramatically impacted the way people have thought about the world, about their lives, about themselves, about the people around them. And so the things that they now see out in front of them is dangerously different than it was before. And it will take, like you said, a long time to be able to put people in a position to have some peace of mind again and to
yeah,
feel confident about being able to go to work, being able to hang out with friends, be in the grocery stores. And hopefully we can tackle some of those ideas on this show about how to take care of yourself so you can go back into the world and check out other people like what you're doing. So if you're open to jumping in, I'm ready to go.
bro, I'm ready. I just had those things that I wanted to share with you before. I uh,
Appreciate it.
I think I'm ready to go. I'm ready.
I'm glad I'm glad you're healthy. I'm glad your mom was here for your birthday. Happy belated birthday, man.
Thank you so
And
much, man. I appreciate it.
couldn't be more excited to have you on here. I think the best place for us to start off would be with a check-in. We do a check-in on every show. We do it like this, just your name, so who you are, where you're checking in at on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, 10 out of 10. And the check-in question for this show is, what is your guilty pleasure? Something you indulge in, maybe is not the best for you, but it's part of your self-care routine or something that you just absolutely can't live without. So
Yeah,
name 1 to 10, guilty pleasure. I'll let you start.
sure. My name is Ali Salama, and uh, I'd say today I'm a solid 8. I believe so, and I feel much more alive than usual. I think it's because of this what we were talking about before the show, John, and I think it's just a self-awareness and self-care that I've been intentionally doing. Um, Guilty pleasure. Ooh, that's you're taking me sideways here. Uh, Guilty pleasure. Sometimes I'd say shisha, and I'm definitely stopping. I'm not definitely like not gonna be smoking, but I think that I just it's a thing that
It's a
you
good
do with
time,
your
man.
yeah. It's a cultural thing. Let's
When
put
you
it
get
that
the
way.
boys together, when you get the amigos together.
Exactly, exactly. And it just reminds me of like, because my mom and my dad and my brother, they smoke and I don't, and it just reminds me of home, and so I make sure to not really indulge, but it does feel so freaking great because some sentiments don't come back until you just like do something that truly messes you up.
Totally. Well, the cool thing with shisha is like it's a very tactile experience. You smell it, you taste it, you see it. You're with the people. There's probably music. You got like your sugar tea or your chai tea with it. So
Yeah.
your all of your senses are indulging simultaneously. But I'm glad it brings you back home.
Yeah, it's like what people don't really realize. It's like a beer here. Some people say, "Hey, let's go for. Do you want to go for a glass of wine or do you want to go for a beer?" And people just over there would be like, "Hey, do you want to go for shisha or do you want to smoke hookah or whatever the hell like they're from whatever however they use their lingo because Middle East or the Arab world is so big you have to understand that like
Yeah,
so many different words are used. But yeah, I think that it's culture is very
beautiful.
interesting. But let's hop into the meaty nitty gritty of the show. And first of all, Jonathan, I want to say thank you for having me because you know I don't really say this, but I don't say this enough. I am a big fan of what you are doing with men's mental health. I only see very select few people doing this type of work, and seriously, I think that this conversation needs to be a lot more spoken of. So thank you for having me.
Totally, man. I appreciate it and look forward to the episode. I gave the audience a brief introduction of who you are prior to us starting, so they get an idea of who we're dealing with here. And I believe we've got their attention now. So I'll check in. We'll jump in. It's Andrews. I'm checking in at a 10, and my guilty pleasure is definitely dark chocolate. I had you can get 3 for 10 lint at the supermarket near my house, and I had 3 and they're gone, and it was like a couple days ago. And so I can't help myself around a little bit of dark chocolate, and it's got a little caffeine in it, so I'm feeling good and I'm ready to.
70%, 75, 80,
Yeah,
95.
usually the 85 is my go-to.
All right. Yeah. I love those. Love
Yeah,
those.
man. Yeah, it's good stuff. If you can, it's an acquired taste. If you can like slowly move yourself up where they remove some of the dairy products, they remove some of the sugar, and you just get that pure cacao, it's a fun time.
Yeah, not there yet, but yeah, I'm a big fan of like that the lint dark chocolate. I'm still at 70, so take it easy on me.
Okay, man. Let's talk about Speaker Slam, because I found out so much about you that I had never known until I watched that speech that you delivered at Speaker Slam. If you can place us, maybe place the audience where you were at 15 years old. You looked at the ground, the color changed on the ground, and you were shocked. What happened to you in that situation? Because when I saw that, I was totally blown away. I had no idea this happened to you.
Yeah. So yeah, when I was definitely um so when I was 15, I was in I think that experience changed my life, and I think that so I got stabbed, and it was over this girl I really liked, and it wasn't, because of it wasn't an intentional incident. It was just a thing that happened then that I wasn't aware of it taking place. It was just after the Egyptian revolution in Egypt, so there's no securities in the street. It was just somewhere. I usually go back to Egypt quite often, but when that happened, I think that I was I was a I was very, very, very shocked. And I think that, usually, just like anybody that goes through uh, that is placed in a traumatic experience, whether you just received news that a loved one is passed, or you just received news that just terrible things, whenever they happen, you're instantly like, you doubt you doubt reality for a second. And I think this was one of those moments where I just, I saw a pool of blood. Just, it was very gruesome, and I realized, like, then and there, that I was just grateful to be alive. And it definitely did teach me a big, big, big lesson that I hope, the life that the life really isn't to be taken for granted. And it's very important, especially in these times.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that you shared in that speech was having the scar of being stabbed and having a conversation that you said changed your life, where your mom said to you, hey, we can get surgery, we can take
Yeah.
care of this, we can patch it up, we could heal you and make it feel better. And I think it speaks volume to what likely the Middle East's mental health culture was like, and also how you thought about yourself as a man, someone who's supposed to be masculine, someone who's supposed to be strong and tough. What did you say to your mom when she said, hey, we can take care of you?
Yeah, I thought, like, till today, like, the scar is on my back. I don't think that I will ever want to, have surgery over something that whenever I see, I sense a very deep sense of pride. And I think that, some people are ashamed uh, of stuff that, in hindsight, truly develops and builds their character. And I think that it's a perception that we need to, speak more of. And that's why I say I'm really a big fan of the work you do with men's mental health, because I think that whenever we have the audacity and the guts and the balls and the courage and everything that you want to think about when you come to think of, bravery, um, we have to think of what has made us the tough uh, men that we are. And I think that embracing and opening up uh, feelings and things that are usually, hidden under the surface, or are usually, brushed off, whether it be through surgery, through makeup, through whatever it is. I think that when we have the courage to look at things for what they truly mean, we can see way beyond the surface, and that, can develop immense progress in one's mindset, and it could truly change someone's life. And in my sense, it did change my life, and I became, a very, very driven person from then onwards. And it showed in a couple of things that I went on to do. And I'm very, proud that I was at a young age able to to not only just, get over this, but, like, I hope in everything I do I could help anybody. And it's not just for the purposes of saying I, or me. It's more so for we, because the more that someone could learn from something like that, anything, whatever it is, the more that young boys will have role models that'll enable them to be the best that they can be at a very young age. And all the stuff around the patriarchy, all these things that we now hear and listen and don't really agree upon and adhere to as young, men that are highly empathetic. This is the way to move forward with those topics.
One of the things I heard you say is how important it is to share our personal stories. And I'm wondering how much of an influence, I was doing a little bit of background and you'd mentioned one of your mentors, one of the men that you respected was Dr. Nasir Loza, I believe.
Yeah.
Am I saying that
Yeah.
correctly?
Nasser, not Nasir, Nasser, yeah.
Nasser. And I believe he connected you with WHO, which is the World Health Organization, and
Yeah.
you've been featured by them. You were Empower Mag was one of the top 7 most impactful social initiatives by Harvard. And so I'm wondering, this mental health journey you went on, how much of that had to do with finally getting to a place in your life where you felt comfortable sharing stories of vulnerability, stories of trauma, stories of basically what Gary Vee talks about is your battle scars, and
Yeah.
actually being able to go in the world and actually talking about them?
I think it's all been around sharing this story, and it's it's one thing to share a story, and it's one thing to empower when you share a story. It's some people just speak words, and other people believe their words, and you feel them because they want to show you that there is hope. And I think that when you share your story, there's a lot of owning yourself in doing it. There's a lot of power in doing it. So it's not an act to put a check mark on it and then I'm done, I shared my story, where's my power, you're fooling me and all this stuff. No, it's not about that. I'm not trying to sell yourself, sure, here I'm trying to really say that when you share something that comes from a very deep place, you feel different. You feel like this no longer haunts you. You don't ever fear any thought that comes to your mind, and in a way you not only allow yourself and give permission for your scars or for your trauma to be acknowledged, because when you acknowledge that, you no longer fear its existence of coming in your head like, oh, I thought of suicide, oh, this needs to come out of my head. You no longer have this anxiety. You're okay with it. And you know what, if you get this whenever you do, because some things just don't go away for a long period of time until you're comfortable with yourself, that storytelling and that skill set is what truly allows you to be more comfortable with yourself, and that aura is emitted, and this is what captivates people love seeing themselves in other people, and the moment you think you're special is the moment you truly realize that when people walk up to you after you just share whatever it is, you realize that we're all the same at our root core. We all struggle, we all suffer. It's just not all of us feel comfortable being ourselves because of the shame that comes around being perfect. And I don't think that this this idea of perfection uh, can be maintained or can last long, after what we're seeing and after the times we're living through. These times are very different than before.
A lot of things come to mind. I think when you talked about, that shame and that feeling of needing to be perfect, I was reading a article on Empower Mag, and it talked about stigma specifically in the Middle East. And so I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in the Middle East. What do mental health conversations sound like in the Middle East? How much stigma is there? I read that in that article, it comes from a Greek word, stigma, which basically means like these are the people who you don't want to associate with, or these are the people who you should try to avoid.
Yeah.
Um, what does that mental health conversation sound like growing up in Egypt, growing up in the Middle East, and
Yeah.
why has that mental health conversation become so important to you?
Yeah, dude. I think I didn't mention, but it's very important to say that I came to Canada when I was 17, and I was clinically diagnosed when I was around 17. No, 19. Sorry, I was clinically diagnosed when I was 19. I couldn't really adjust here, and to be honest, you learn that it's not about adjusting. It's about letting things go in a manner and adapting. It's not really adjusting, because the people are the same around me. The house that I live is in the same. But when you come to think of, I went through what I went through here, there has to the transformation that I went through was in my mind. I come to realize that the crazy quote unquote person that I would have been called upon once upon a time, which is the stigma or the associations that we have back home, and I realized that if I wasn't truly here in an environment that was supportive, in an environment where I could actually heal, then that wouldn't have been possible. You wouldn't have been talking to the Ali you're talking to today. So I put myself in a, you know, in a point, in a place where people were still back home, we're still in the middle of an environment that wasn't supportive, and I asked myself, well, how different would your life have been? And that's when I realized that, holy crap, maybe this is why I'm here, and maybe this is why this all happened, maybe this is why I need to talk, and maybe this is why sometimes I don't think that what I've done is enough. And I think that, like, uh, you know, I need to speak in a different manner. I need to reach people differently. And if you realize on Instagram now, I post Arabic. I never really used to post Arabic. I realized that people, you know, don't need to hear me talk in English. And even though I'm a great, you know, communicator in English, maybe I need to become a great Arabic communicator, and that needs time. So my point here is saying that I've just started this journey because I realized how privileged I was. I realized that in the Middle East, I would have been blacklisted. Just like when I spoke at the World Health Organization, people didn't know that, like, the 90 Arab journalists that were the top journalists in the Middle East and North Africa region that were there in a World Health Organization workshop, was invited to simply change the perception of mental health reporting in the way that they report mental health incidences. And the World Health Organization brought me in to sort of uh, be a not a moderator, but as a guest. And they didn't say why they brought me in as a guest until the last day, when I was hanging out with all those reporters and having, you know, dinner, lunch with them, and joking, and you know,
Shooting the shit.
grasping their banter. And there I was, the last day, I stood up and said, well, this is my story. And everybody just jaw dropped, like, holy crap, you're someone that could have been someone we just wrote about, but you could marry our daughters, you know, you could have been, you know, you could have been one. And that's when they realized that, this is when I realized my true purpose. My true purpose was to make sure that, you know, anyone that was ever blacklisted can have a second chance at life. Because I think that the privilege that I have by being in Canada, it shouldn't just be mine. It should be a lot of other people. But ignorance sometimes doesn't allow that to happen.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. That's really powerful. Them seeing you, right? They're hanging out with you for a weekend conference, laughing, joking, hanging out. You're well adjusted, you're confident, you care about making a difference in the world. And then all of a sudden they hear all the background story of, hey, I'm someone that you would write about. I'm someone that's been diagnosed with a mental illness, and I still am taking ownership of my life, and I've found the techniques and tools and strategies that I can use to be able to thrive with my mental health regardless. And I can go out and kick ass in the world. And so that's a hugely inspiring story. A lot of people listening who may have been diagnosed with a mental illness in the past, who are men struggling with their mental health, whether it's because they're lonely or their financial livelihood has been impacted by COVID, or for whatever reason they've experienced trauma like you and I both have in our lives, and are now in a place where they're in the basement, and they don't know who to reach out to, who to call to. It's really, really valuable to have stories like yours.
Yeah, thank you.
So I appreciate you sharing.
And I must say that, you know, in the midst of all this, you know, I just want to say one thing before we move on to our next point, is that always, always, always go back to basics whenever things are so rough. Because no matter how, like, high, you know, even sharing the story, doing this amazing thing, and I'm sure we both, you know, have done, everyone listening has done something really that they're proud of. But things have to sometimes, when you take them to yourself, you have to go back to basics. And whatever that baseline is for you, you know, when everything is canceled out, I tell myself this as I'm saying it out loud, because this is what I've been actively doing. And I know as we go into the next segment, we're going to talk more about, you know, how can we truly manage manage our well-being in this given situation.
Yeah, let's dive further into it, and let's just say, would you be open to sharing when you really were at your lowest and what that
Yeah.
looked like for you, what it sounded like, what it felt like, where were you, who was around you?
Yeah, 100%. I was in this room actually, and I just seriously couldn't see tomorrow. I couldn't see tomorrow. I actually had to lock all the windows here, and I was scared of jumping. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie. I was scared of jumping. I was scared of doing something. You know, that at the time I felt that would have been you know, stupid, because I wasn't. I was when whoever thinks of things that they never think of before, they start to fear themselves, right? So whenever you fear yourself, you realize that you've kind of lost a little bit of control over your mind, and when that starts to happen, you start to take precautions as if you're battling some sort of war or some sort of enemy, and the enemy
And
is
you
in
are.
you, and the enemy is in yourself, or the enemy is a part of you. So that was definitely something that I never shared before, and I feel like that coupled with hearing some noises, being super paranoid, uh, feeling so low, like not being able to know what time of day it was, and very minimal self care, like not being able to go shower, do the minimal things, let alone reply on texts or call. At that time, I was only speaking to my mother, but even that minute or two,
Just seems like an
made,
insurmountable.
yeah, it was hard. It was definitely hard, and that's what pushes me to do what I do. It's not definitely a Cinderella story, and I don't think it ever will. But it's an important story, and it's not my story. It's everyone's story, right? And I think that um, I truly didn't even think that this was possible, Jonathan, to feel this low. I mean, I was an athlete. I still am, and I used to make fun of people that felt like that, and I would see this as weakness. And until it happened to me, I seriously start to think that the people that get over what they get through are the strongest people in the world. And I seriously started to see Michael Phelps as a different person after seeing all his work in mental health, and starting to see a lot of what Gary V says, just not being too happy, not being too sad, just no matter how far you go in life, just having this I'm okay, that this equilibrium, because this is when you have the most emotional control, and I think that this is something that I've come to learn over the time. But going back to, again, that point, the only thing that I wanted to mention was that during that time, I wish I um I wish I sought help. uh, I, I I sought help earlier, because I was still thinking about what other people would think of, even though I knew I needed it. But I still couldn't get over the reputation and all these things that people were gonna say. And to be honest, if I really look back, like, who are the people that were gonna tell, how much of an impact would that have mattered now, 4 years later? Zero. I was not putting things right together, and if anyone hearing that needed to hear that, I hope that if there is a time, please understand that you come first, and whoever's important will always be your number one supporter, and whoever isn't, doesn't deserve the most beautiful, or the best you, because that's just the way life is.
There's so much wisdom in what you shared there, man. So first of all, thank you for being vulnerable for our audience. And one of the behaviors we try to advocate for at Jack.org, which you are also a collaborator with and an advocate for, and I admire the work that you've done with them,
Mhm.
is help-seeking behavior. Is when you're struggling, when you're in crisis, that is the time where you need to know who are the people that you can reach out to, or who are the people that you feel comfortable reaching out to. Because in a crisis situation, it was as you described, you don't feel a sense of control. Things do not become rational and practical anymore. They become very irrational, and you lose that sense of control. And so knowing that you already have these outlets to reach out to when you need it is so important. Like, help seeking behavior is one of the major pillars to what we do at Jack.org, and helping people be there for each other and be there for themselves. And so I appreciate you sharing how that was important to you. It like and pointing out how important it is that you and I, being people that have been in the mental health industry for years, and when we struggle, we still struggle with reaching out for help, and we still struggle with talking about it, that I can see how challenging and how stigmatizing it could feel to be someone that isn't in these industries and is struggling and not knowing what to do.
Yeah, and especially in personal relationships, right? When you come to think of traditionally, maybe here in the West it's different, but no, I still refuse to believe that it's very different because the patriarch, the what a man is defined as, and sometimes uh, maybe in traditional Eastern cultures, it's much more dominant, that notion and thought that you have to be super strong as a man, and when you're with a woman, emotionally depends on the bullshit stuff that actually like doesn't really uh doesn't really equate to being to being or to being close to what a man really is. And the idea of masculinity is truly fragmented in that notion of thought. So in that essence, I want to also display that when men really have that capacity to express in a manner that empowers them, women actually feel safer because she's able to the woman, at least in my life, actually, let me speak about myself. The women in my life have felt very safe to speaking to me about incidents of abuse, rape, so many different things. And when I come to think about why me, like people I have never encountered before on Instagram and so many different outlets, when I come to ask, well, why what have I done to sort of elicit this energy? Because there has to be some sort of response or
Yeah.
something to have attracted that. When I started to ask some people, and the only thing that has caused that difference and that sense of security, which sort of goes back to what men really like. Men really like to feel that whenever they're with someone, that someone is secure with them. Well, that security comes when you're vulnerable and open. So it's a very double-edged sword that just needs a little bit of fine tuning. And I think that once we get that right and understand that feeling deeply is such a beautiful thing, only when we truly know the strength of harnessing the power of emotions and the power of expression.
That's exactly to the letter what Circle Up is about. And in your speech, when you were talking we were talking about that speech at the very beginning, you talked about toughening up as almost like a persistent theme throughout. And like that was something that you carried with you, is like, my identity as a man is someone that needs to toughen up. And that's almost synonymous exactly with what we talk about in Circle Up, which is don't man up, circle up.
Yeah,
Right? When you feel like it's really getting challenging, when it's really getting struggling, when you're really in the basement and you don't know what to do, go back to the basics. Like you said, start surround yourself with the circle of men that you can lean on, that men that you can open up to, vulnerably share what's happening in your life. And those men actually give a fuck.
yeah,
And they're invested in your growth. They're invested in you doing well and getting back on your feet so you can go back out and be a leader in your community. Like that's the whole point. If you toughen up and bottle it all up, it's like a pressure cooker.
yeah. And you don't last, and I think that whether whoever is listening to it, you don't want to just have 2 3 great years recovering. You want to have a life full of greatness, and that life depends on the quality of your relationships. And the most beautiful thing is that's always available to you. Like that is a decision, and it doesn't it doesn't that decision um isn't so far away. It starts by today, and it starts by a message. Hey, how are you? Well, I just want to ask about how you're feeling and how you're doing. And suddenly it becomes a reciprocal thing. And suddenly, hey, do you want to just hang out tomorrow for a beer or for coffee or something? And then before you know it, you realize that you both have had something that was going on in the past month, and you bond, and then life happens, and that's how you start to develop a meaningful relationship. It's when you truly look beyond a human being. And I think that what you guys are doing, Circle Up, is great. And I think that should seriously be uh, a fundamental core educational lesson in whether it's high school or elementary school. I just think that these things right now, with the statistics that are going on in the world, with depression being the leading cause of disability in the world, and with all that the world is going to see in the aftermath of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, it is just only going to be much more needed. And I hope that we can, help in any way.
Yeah, speaking of helping any way, I got two kind of directions that I want to take this last section here. One is to talk about on the other side of this experience that you had, how do you build yourself back up after that? Like, what are you mentioned that go back to the fundamentals? So I want to find out what are those fundamentals for you, and then the other side, I want to talk about your friend Lisa, because your friend Lisa reminds me of what we do at Circle Up, which is we take care of each other. We're there to support each other, and I was reading your Instagram, getting to know you a little bit better, and she sounds like someone that really is an exemplary example of how to be there for someone. So I want to talk about both those ideas. And I also want to talk about what we're not going to talk about on this show, just because, for the sake of, you're an expert when it comes to marketing. You're an
Yeah.
expert when it comes to communication, strategy, brand building. And you started a podcast called The Art of Podcasting with Microsoft. So if you, as a partner there, so if you're interested in speaking or listening to Ali's work on marketing, branding, podcasting, it won't be on the show. So go check out his podcast, Art of Podcasting. And if you want to say anything about that really briefly, go ahead. And then I'd love to
Yeah, I
dive
think
in
that
with you.
like one of the side projects I love doing is sharing, sharing a little bit of my strengths with whoever I can. And I think so. The Art of Podcasting is a 2 to 3 month project I'm running with Microsoft, and it's podcasting 101 for those that want to build their personal brands, understand the power of podcasting. Just as what Jonathan is doing here, he's building a great community with Circle Up. um, and I think that everyone has the potential to use their voice, whether they are a professional, whether they are an advocate of something, whether they are a family. Heck, you can have a podcast for your family and just
Sure.
share great things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, get to know your parents a little bit better.
a
When it was last
hundred,
time you had a really deep conversation, ask them about what it was like in the 50s or what it was like in the 60s.
right? There is no way of doing or there is no way of podcasting, but I truly believe that it is a great community building exercise. So we'll leave that there. I actually have Empathy Always Wins, which I really want you to be on later on the show, Johnson. This is the
Sure.
exclusive, youth leadership and leadership podcast on community building and empathy. And I truly believe that the next generation of the strongest leaders in the world will be the ones who will deploy empathetic leadership to the T. And this is something that is not, we aren't born with it. I think when you do your exercises with your community and circle up, you will develop empathetic skills. You will learn how to be empathetic and see other people's world vision by just listening, active listening. There's so many things that make someone a much more effective leader. And these are the types of leaders this world needs now. So Empathy Always Wins is definitely a show for those that want to link mental health with leadership. But if we're gonna go to the point and discuss, how do you go back to the foundations, and what does that look like for me? This summer was a very tough summer, and I speak, of course, I speak of myself, and I realized that I haven't felt that low and since being diagnosed, for sure, for sure, for sure. I I take regular breaks off of social media. I got into this vicious circle of smoking cigars every day. I got into, and I'm an athlete, so like I usually, instead of indulging in temporary or instantly gratifying things, I would
I
spend
usually
an
go on top of
hour
it.
spend an hour or two at the gym and get better, or get well, let's just put it that way, and feel much more fulfilled. So when I realized that I'm slipping and I'm slipping on those things, that was when I realized, well, what does it mean to go back to basics? So if you're slipping on things that you don't usually slip, on, and you're also feeling that, hey, I just need to, take a checkpoint here, and just check on myself, and and see, am I really fulfilled with what I'm doing here, and how I'm living my day to day. That's what I did a couple of weeks ago, and I realized that, okay, well, what makes me happy? What makes I remember a time where I felt very, very, very confident and very fulfilled. What did that feel like? What was I doing? What was my eating regimen like? What was my work schedule like? What were all these? What
Yeah.
was my
How do
world?
I get back to what worked?
Exactly, exactly. And that for me was, uh, working out on a consistent basis, eating very clean, staying away from, drugs. Um, if it was an occasional shisha, I'd have a shisha, whatever that was. But
Nice.
it was just going back to basics. It was all about having a morning routine, having structure in my day, and making sure that I had control over things I could control. And if I could do that now, I would just write in my journal that this was a great day, and I actively, intentionally think about what I did today, whether it was, whatever that was that I just mentioned, and I make sure that every day is a small win, and I make sure that I record those wins, because if you intentionally do effort and you do not acknowledge that effort to yourself, uh, you then dive in a deeper spiral. So you have to take yourself by the hand of a baby or a kid walking, and you have to, parent yourself there, and be so compassionate with yourself. One thing I don't emphasize when I say all this is that I'm making sure that this is the most important step of the way, is understanding that this isn't a linear stage. Like, you will fuck up on days, you will uh, let into your desires some days you'll drink heavier, you'll smoke a bit heavier,
Yeah.
but
Grab the cigar.
exactly, you'll grab the cigar on days. But the most important thing is to be compassionate, understand that you are human, and that makes you so humble whenever you achieve something great down the line. And that's why we do what we do.
There's a lot of gold in there and a lot of parallels. I'm not sure if you ever did the Jack.org speaker training, but there's so many parallels in the way that we communicate to students what is mental health and how to take care of yourself. Like, one of the big ones is checking in with yourself. That's why I check in at the beginning of the episode. If you're a 7, 6, then we'll talk about that. What's going on with you? And I'm glad you're an 8. I'm glad you took that social media break. You saw your mom. You get to hang out with her and build fill yourself back up. So that practice of how do you do that? Is it journaling? Is it just like maybe standing in front of the mirror? What's a way that our audience and our listeners who they're not sure how they're doing right now, but today would be a good opportunity for them to check in with themselves?
Yeah, I definitely, whenever it's looking like a 5 or a 4 or even a 6, I definitely take a journal and write exactly how I feel. And I just write everything. I write why I'm not satisfied with myself. I write what I can change. I write what I can't change. And I write, well, if I could change this and this and this and then my control, then I'll definitely feel like an 8 or a 9, right? And then I say, okay, well, how am I going to put a realistic time frame for me to, get back? And when you choose yourself, and when you work on yourself, there's no better feeling than that. There's absolutely. And this starts with an intention to do so, with a realistic, mindset that you have chosen yourself. It starts from that moment you take the pen and you put that pen onto the paper, and you sign it off with your own signature. That's what I do every single night.
I love that, man. It reminds me of, sometimes you don't have a listening ear. Like, I don't always have my roommate there where I can word vomit or tell him what's going on in my life. Sometimes putting pen to paper is just as valuable. And like, as an example, one of my biggest pet peeves that prevents me from sleeping deeply and soundly is I have a thought like, call Ali tomorrow, and I don't write it down, because if I don't write it down, it's like, will I even do it? Will I remember? And so by just taking your thoughts, and like you're saying, it's how I feel, what I can change, what I can't change, just anything that's going on, any thoughts you're having, instead of overthinking them, just put them on paper. And once you see them there, you realize it's not all that serious.
Yeah. And I think it's very healthy to see what you're thinking of, no matter how dark or shameful it is. I remember, I remember one time I was so ashamed of a thought that I had, because I wasn't, someone had came out to me, and like, at a point in my life where I was seriously needing psychological support, and it started to, make me so unsure about my sexuality, and I started to be deeply uncomfortable with who I am, because I was, when that person confided in me, I needed to be able to. I wasn't in a state of mind, because when the way he did it and the way they did it made me feel like when someone sometimes speaks to you of something very deep and traumatic in their life, and not just a normal story, you have to know, and that's part of our training, right? When you know what you're able to absorb as part of, because there's something called vicarious trauma. And when someone talks about a story that is highly traumatic, you have to be able to understand what you can absorb from that, and what you have to draw the line and say, hey, I'd actually be extremely I'd find this extremely great if I were to connect you to this resource, because that resource would help you. And you don't shut them out, but you can't do what a professional's job could do, and that could actually harm you. So when I didn't
You're not a
realize that.
professional, so it makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly. And I at that point, that was a very pivotal point in my life. But I also want to say that out loud, because I didn't really share that ever. But that affected me at a time where I wasn't 100%, myself, and I had to write those uncomfortable thoughts about me, my skin. And it wasn't sexuality being that headline. It was just me feeling different because of because of something that I had to then work on, plus the inner work that I had to do with other traumas that I had. You know what I mean? And I think that it's
And
so
layering
important.
that on top.
Exactly. So it's so important when you are feeling any sense of shame, any sense of any disturbing thought, no matter how dark it is, don't be scared that someone is gonna find it in your house. You know, write that down, because that made all that sped up every single uh every single hardship I went through. That sped up the recovery process, and it helped a lot. So if that really helped, I hope it did.
Yeah, there's two things that come out from that is the first bit, which we were talking about, is journaling, writing things down, having conversations about what's happening in our head rather than letting them just echo, like be an echo. Alan Watts has an analogy. I just want to share it briefly, where he talks about anxiety being like taking a speaker and a microphone and putting them close together, and you get that resonance where it starts to echo, and the closer it gets, it echoes more and more. When we are experiencing anxiety and overthinking, when we don't speak them into the space with listeners and we don't put it on paper, it just echoes louder and louder. And the second that you open up, you let the lid off the pressure cooker, the pressure is released. And so I want to encourage everyone, journaling is a phenomenal practice and a help seeking behavior. And so when you have a space to be able to share, like Ali and I having a conversation, I remember we had a conversation a couple of months ago. We've had many, some about Circle Up, which I appreciate you helping us grow that brand. And then some just about like, hey, I've been smoking too many cigars and I don't want to do that anymore. And like those types of conversations stay with me, because it reminds me that if Ali can tell me that's something he wants to work on, then what is it that I've been holding in myself, feeling like I couldn't share?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and it just shows you that sometimes, looking strong on the outside is perceived differently when we see people on social media or wherever, even in real life. We don't really know their stories until they truly, truly, truly show us a different version. So I know it's a very cliche thing, never judge a book by its cover, but it's something that we often need a reminder.
I agree, man. Trite is usually trite for a reason. So I like cliche statements. The last thing I'll finish off here is you talked about someone sharing something traumatic with you and that being very difficult to hold space for. You called it, I think it was visceral,
Vicarious trauma.
vicarious trauma. And Jack.org has 5 golden rules for being there for someone. And one of them is know your role. And so someone that's not a professional and someone that you ask yourself, what's my current state of my mental health? Am I healthy enough? Am I in a position to be able to support this person? Or does it make more sense to connect them to professional help, which you should be if people are struggling? So I appreciate you bringing that up. And if anyone's interested in how to have more empowering mental health conversations, I highly recommend that you check out Empower Mag. I saw some great stuff on there. And also Jack.org. They've got an amazing website called Be There, on how to be there for people. And I want to round off this show with one last story. If you don't mind sharing the story of Lisa, you mentioned, you were just having a hard time and she showed up at your door and you had a day together.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think Lisa is, she's one of the most caring people I've met. And I remember that, before a month, actually, no, 3 weeks before that speech that you mentioned about Speaker Slam, my granddad passed away. And I just, sometimes I'm the type of person that doesn't, I haven't felt grief in years. I don't really, thank God I haven't had a loss very, prior to that. Don't really have many losses, and that hit very differently. So I think I just took some space off, and Lisa showed up at my door with my favorite Chipotle, takeout, and it just made my day. We just watched, Kevin Hart's documentary for the entire day,
Nice.
and we did nothing. She was there. I'd never really had someone there and understanding what being there means, because I never, even when I went through my experiences coming to Canada like years earlier on, no one was there. It was a phone call, but like being physically there, there's a sense of security that, even me, is someone I'd say an alpha type man. I never really thought, I never really understood what that means. And that just goes back to what I was telling you about, when I was an athlete and I train 9 times, 10 times a week, and when I hear the word depressed, and all these things were just a sign of weakness, and now I understand what, grief and what being there means, because I needed it, and even though I didn't know I needed it, but until you experience the need of needing something, you start to change, and I think it humbles you. So that was my experience, with Lisa's story, because that was a fundamental change in the way I perceive friends and the way I perceive friendship and being there. And sometimes you just need to shut up and just show up. That's it.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, there's very few things that say I care about you than showing up in person.
Yeah, it
And
is
it's
very.
tough to do. It's tough to do that right now, and she did that for you. So that's beautiful, man. Thanks for sharing that story. And for those that are thinking about how do I be there for myself, how do I be there for others, I encourage you to share this podcast and check out Empower Meg. Check out BeThere.org with Jack.org. Before we close off this show, one last thing I wanted to share is I feel bad for the podcast listeners that aren't seeing this on YouTube because they don't get to see how nice both our hair looks. Um, but any last words of wisdom, anything that's on your heart that you want to share with our listeners before we tune out?
um, I just want to share that, sometimes we really struggle within ourselves, because we want some things like right now. We want a financial burden. We want a sign. We want the dream right now. We want something to change urgently, and that causes so much stress. Um, Something that I always think about is, what would my life look like if I had everything that I wanted? Whether that would have been whatever that was. It was the partner, the security, whatever way you define security, or whatever the way you define peace or happiness. And I like to think about things, I like to reverse engineer things. And it's a skill called visualization. I think, Jonathan, you know that very well, but it's something
Yeah,
that I
totally.
truly, live and swear by every single day. And I think this changed a lot about, a lot around who I am, and especially today's day and age, where I am sure even myself, as I say this, there's a level of anxiety within, my body, and level of unease because of the pandemic. But I deploy this skill every single moment. And whenever I feel like there's an unease, I remember yesterday I was breathing deeply before I sleep, letting go, and into the sensation that is your mind, and being very, very, very meditative, and going into that thought, into that being of having everything you ever desired, and feeling the sensations that you would have when you enter that state. Think about what life will look then. because sometimes you just have to be that person to get whatever it is that you want to get. And
Mm.
it's not that you need something that you don't have right now, because energy does not lie. And that is one thing that, I mastered in terms of, from the moment I was very, 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 and I still continue to master. And it's the hardest thing ever when you slip again during the summer and you feel that you've lost, your energy. And the moment you can get back to entering the state, and this is the last thing I want to say, is the moment that you truly will never lose, no matter how big of a financial loss, no matter how big of a personal loss you lose, whenever you can take yourself back to that state, because everything is reversible as long as you truly can take yourself back to that state of mind. And that is the truest, strongest place that you can ever live from and energize from. And this is your core state. And this is one thing that I highly urge everyone to take a moment and digest.
That's empowering, man. Yeah, there's a concept called be, do, have, where most people are thinking of, how can I have the things that I want? But instead, if we focus on who we're being
Yeah,
and we start there with being first, like you said, who would I need to be to have everything that I wanted? Then having everything you want will take care of itself.
yeah,
If you start with being who you would need to be to have that.
yeah. That's exactly it, Jonathan.
Thanks, man. And I'm not surprised about the visualization. I see the old Muhammad Ali in the background, who was a huge fan of that. I'm sure he was an inspiration to you, and you are an inspiration to me, and
Thank
you're
you,
an
man.
inspiration to all our listeners. And I'm just fired up about what you're doing in the world with an Empower Mag. Thank you for always being there to support me and Circle Up. And I look forward to more of these conversations.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Habibi.